The Cathar Empire's warships breached the outer defenses of the solar system with contemptuous ease. Their massive vessels, angular and imposing against the blackness of space, had disabled Earth's automated satellite defense network in less than 6 hours. The tactical superiority was absolute, just as Grand Marshal Forlag had predicted. Forlag stood on the command deck of the flagship inexorable, his tall, slender frame silhouetted against holographic displays showing Earth's blue-green sphere. His scaled skin reflected the blue glow of tactical readouts as he clasped his four-fingered hands behind his back. The Cathar military doctrine had conquered 17 inhabited worlds across 3-star systems, each victory more efficient than the last. This primitive world would be no different. Grand Marshal, the communications officer, called out, "We've intercepted significant human communications traffic regarding something they call Project Nightingale. It appears to be their primary strategic response to our presence." Forlag's vertical pupils narrowed. "Show me." The holographic displays shifted to reveal intercepted video feeds from Earth's leadership councils. Humans in formal attire debated passionately about the implementation of this Nightingale protocol. Forlag listened carefully, expecting details of hidden weapon systems or desperate last-stand military maneuvers. Instead, he heard discussions about cultural transmission packages, artistic saturation, and psychological redirection. The humans were talking about sending music, art, philosophy, and personal narratives directly to the Cathar fleet. Forlag stared in disbelief as Earth's Security Council voted unanimously to activate this project as their official first response, with minimal military countermeasures mentioned as backup options. The Cathar command staff exchanged bewildered glances. "This is their strategy?" Combat tactician Moore growled, mandibles clicking in what passed for Cathar amusement. "Bombarding us with their primitive artistic expressions and philosophical ramblings? Perhaps they seek to delay while repositioning their defensive assets," suggested Fleet Overseer Drath. "Scan for military mobilization," ordered Forlag, though he detected no genuine threat. The Cathar military class had evolved beyond emotional distractions. Their rigid social structure valued logic, discipline, and the inexorable march of expansion. Emotions were weaknesses that had been bred out of the warrior caste generations ago. "Minimal military response detected," reported the scanning officer. "Their armed forces remain in defensive postures only. However, we are detecting massive data transmission activity. They truly believe they can defeat us with culture." Forlag's voice carried a rare note of incredulity. "A species facing extinction often reverts to irrational behavior," Grand Marshal offered Ziril, the fleet's chief psychological analyst. The slightly smaller Cathar approached the command platform, data tablet in hand. "I recommend allowing this Project Nightingale to proceed. Analyzing their cultural transmissions could reveal useful psychological weaknesses to exploit during the occupation phase." Forlag considered this. "Very well. Proceed with the invasion as planned. Let them waste their final hours sending us their noise. It changes nothing." Within hours, Earth began broadcasting on all frequencies. The data stream was immense. Music spanning centuries and styles, visual art from every culture and era, philosophical texts from ancient to modern, historical records including humanity's own mistakes and conflicts, and most curiously, personal narratives from ordinary humans describing their lives, hopes, and fears. The Cathar communications arrays automatically filtered most of this cultural bombardment as irrelevant noise, but as per Ziril's recommendation, the data was captured and stored for later analysis. The invasion preparations continued unabated. 3 days later, the first Cathar ground forces descended toward Earth's surface. Captain Horek commanded one of the lead battalions, tasked with securing a reception zone in what humans called New York City. Intelligence suggested the metropolis had been mostly evacuated, another puzzling decision. Standard invasion protocol would have expected the humans to concentrate defenses around population centers. "Perimeter secured, Captain," reported squad leader Thex. No resistance encountered. Horek surveyed the empty streets through his tactical visor. The silence was disconcerting. Life signs, minimal. Scattered individuals, no armed groups detected. Proceed to Phase 2. Secure the designated high-value targets. The Cathar troops moved methodically through the abandoned city. What they found confused them. The high-value targets were not military installations or government facilities, but museums, libraries, concert halls, and art galleries, all left intact and accessible. Public terminals have been activated to display human historical and cultural information. Automated systems played music in parks and public spaces. Captain, this structure appears to be some kind of information repository, reported one soldier, standing at the entrance to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Secure it and assess for strategic value. Horek ordered, though he was beginning to question what strategic value meant in this bizarre scenario. As days passed, our forces reported similar situations worldwide. Humans had withdrawn from major cities, leaving behind vast repositories of cultural information. The few humans who remained were unarmed scholars, artists, and cultural representatives who offered no resistance and attempted to engage Cathar troops in dialogue. In the flagship above, Forlag grew increasingly irritated. Where is their military response? Do they truly believe we will be deterred by these exhibitions? Zero, who had been analyzing the human transmissions, spoke carefully. Their strategy is unusual, Grand Marshal. They appear to be deliberately avoiding conventional resistance while maximizing exposure to their cultural output. A strategy of surrender, then, Forlag dismissed. Prepare for full occupation protocols. But as the first week of occupation stretched into the second, strange reports began filtering back to Cathar Command. Discipline issues were emerging among ground forces, minor at first, but growing in frequency. A squad had been discovered listening to human music during patrol duty instead of maintaining alert status. A technical analysis team had spent hours studying human philosophical texts rather than completing their infrastructure assessment. Captain Horek himself had filed an unusually reflective report questioning the purpose of securing culturally significant locations with no military value. Forlag summoned Ziril to the command deck. Explain these irregularities. Ziril's demeanor had subtly changed in recent days. He seemed more contemplative, less rigid in his movements. I believe the humans are attempting something unprecedented, Grand Marshal. They are waging a form of cultural warfare. Instead of targeting our bodies or our technology, they are targeting our minds. Absurd. The Cathar mind is disciplined and impervious to such manipulation. With respect, our psychological models may have underestimated the power of prolonged exposure to diverse ideological concepts. The human's cultural database is remarkably diverse and complex. They do not share a unified philosophy or purpose. Their strength appears to derive from this very diversity. Forlag dismissed Ziril's concerns and ordered stricter discipline measures. Warriors found engaging with human cultural materials without explicit analytical purpose would face severe consequences. Down on Earth, Captain Horek was leading an assessment of a structure humans called Lincoln Center. His troops moved efficiently through the performance spaces, scanning for hidden weapons or communication systems. Finding none, they began to withdraw. As they reached the main concert hall, an automated system activated. The hall's lights dimmed, and music began to play, a complex orchestral piece that filled the space with sound. Horek should have immediately ordered its deactivation, but something in the arrangement of notes caught his attention. The music built in complexity, layers of sound interacting in ways that seemed to bypass his logical faculties and speak directly to something deeper. "Captain, shall we terminate the audio transmission?" his lieutenant asked. Horek found himself hesitating. "No, I will analyze it further. Continue the sweep of the remaining areas." When the lieutenant had left, Horek stood alone in the concert hall, listening. The music evoked sensations he had no words for, emotions that Cathar society had systematically eliminated from their warrior caste. It was unsettling, and yet he could not bring himself to leave until the piece had finished. Later that night, in his temporary command center, Horek found himself distracted by thoughts of the music. The complex harmonies seemed to have embedded themselves in his mind, challenging the ordered structure of his thoughts. He accessed his neural implants database, searching for information about this form of human expression called classical music. Meanwhile, in the analysis division aboard the flagship, Zero was experiencing his own form of disruption. Tasked with analyzing human philosophical texts for exploitable weaknesses, he found himself increasingly drawn into their arguments and perspectives. Human philosophers like Kant, Lao Tzu, and Sun asked questions about existence, ethics, and purpose that Cthar society had long ago deemed irrelevant. He had engaged in educational AI left in one of the human archives, intending to extract information efficiently. Instead, he found himself in a 4-hour dialogue about the nature of consciousness and free will. Disturbed by his own behavior, Zero nevertheless could not dismiss the conversation as meaningless. The questions raised lingered, challenging assumptions he had never thought to question. By the third week of occupation, concerning patterns were emerging across all Cthar ground forces. Disciplinary incidents had increased by 200%. Troops were displaying unprecedented behaviors, attempting to create artwork, engaging in philosophical debates during rest periods, requesting access to more human cultural materials for analysis. Captain Horek's reports had become increasingly contemplative, questioning the purpose of certain occupation protocols. When ordered to prepare a museum for conversion to a military command center, he had responded with an unprecedented request for clarification. The artifacts contained within represent significant achievements of human creative evolution. Request guidance on proper relocation procedures to preserve their integrity. Such language was alien to Cthar military communication. Forlag ordered Horek to report to the flagship for evaluation. In the debriefing chamber, Horek stood at attention, but something in his posture had changed, a subtle relaxation of the rigid Cthar military bearing. "Captain, explain your recent communications," Forlag demanded. "Grand Marshal, exposure to human cultural artifacts has yielded unexpected tactical insights," Horek began, using formal military language. "Their species development has followed a fundamentally different path from ours. Where we have pursued linear progression through conquest and assimilation, they have embraced divergent thinking and creative problem-solving. That is not a tactical assessment, Captain. That is philosophical speculation. With respect, sir, the line between tactics and philosophy appears less distinct than our doctrine suggests." Horek's mandibles twitched slightly, a gesture of discomfort. "I have come to question whether our definition of strategic value is overly narrow." Forlag studied his once exemplary officer with growing concern. "You have been compromised, Captain. Report to medical for evaluation and neural recalibration." "Compromised or enlightened, sir?" Horek asked quietly. "The humans call it perspective, the ability to step outside one's paradigm and consider alternatives. Their history shows that rigid adherence to a single viewpoint often leads to collapse." Before Forlag could respond, an urgent communication interrupted them. Security forces had discovered an unauthorized gathering of off-duty warriors in a maintenance bay. They had created a makeshift gallery displaying crude attempts at artwork and were engaged in a passionate discussion about the concept of beauty, a notion entirely absent from Cthar military language. The cultural contamination was spreading faster than anticipated. Forlag ordered immediate isolation of all troops showing signs of deviation, but the logistics were impossible. The signs were appearing everywhere, in subtle ways. Questions where there should be only obedience, hesitation where there should be certainty, curiosity where there should be focus. Zero's latest report to command contained disturbing conclusions. Instead of identifying exploitable weaknesses in human psychology, it questioned the foundations of the Cthar expansionist doctrine itself. It cited human historical examples of empires that had collapsed under the weight of their own rigid ideologies, drawing explicit parallels to Cthar society. Most alarmingly, it concluded, the absence of creative expression, philosophical inquiry, and emotional awareness in Cathar society may represent not evolutionary advancement, as our doctrine suggests, but rather a critical developmental limitation that threatens our long-term species survival. Forlag ordered Ziral's immediate arrest, but the analyst had disappeared from his quarters, along with a significant portion of the human cultural database he had been studying. As the occupation entered its fourth week, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Cathar ground forces were exhibiting widespread insubordination. Units deployed to secure new territories instead spent time exploring abandoned human cultural centers. Military communications were increasingly filled with philosophical questions and cultural references. When Forlag ordered a hard crackdown, strict information control, forced neural recalibration, and severe punishment for any warrior engaging with human cultural materials, the effect was opposite to what he intended. The restrictions drove the cultural exchange underground. Secret discussion groups formed. Warriors shared contraband human literature and music. Some began creating their own art and poetry, clumsy attempts to express the new thoughts awakening within them. Captain Horek, who had escaped neural recalibration through the help of sympathetic medical officers, found himself at the center of a growing movement within the Cathar forces. In a hidden chamber beneath New York City, he addressed a gathering of warriors who had been transformed by their exposure to human culture. Our entire lives, we have been told that our purpose is conquest, that the expansion of the Cathar Empire is the highest calling, he told them. But the humans have shown us another path. They have conquered no worlds, yet their ideas have conquered us more completely than our weapons ever conquered them. On the flagship, Forlag faced a crisis unprecedented in Cathar military history. Reports of mass insubordination flowed in hourly. Entire battalions were abandoning their posts to engage with human cultural repositories. Some warriors had established direct communication with hidden human cultural ambassadors, engaging in philosophical exchanges and artistic collaboration. In desperation, Forlag ordered a decisive show of force. A massive attack on a known human shelter area would remind both species of Cathar military dominance and the futility of resistance, conventional or otherwise. The attack force was assembled, warriors deemed still loyal to the traditional Cathar hierarchy. As the dropships prepared to launch, Captain Horek's voice came over the fleet-wide communication system, bypassing security protocols with help from converted Cathar technicians. Brothers and sisters of the Cathar, I speak to you not as a captain, but as a fellow being awakening to a larger universe. His voice resonated throughout the fleet. Today we are ordered to attack beings who have not raised weapons against us, who have instead offered us the gift of their accumulated wisdom and creativity. Our military code has always held that true honor lies in facing worthy opponents in combat. What honor can be found in destroying those who fight us only with ideas? Throughout the fleet and on Earth's surface, Cathar warriors listened. In dropship after dropship, weapons were lowered. Launch sequences were canceled. The attack never materialized. Forlag, watching his authority crumble, received an unexpected communication request from a human. Against all protocol, he accepted it. The screen revealed an elderly human woman with dark skin and silver hair. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of profound knowledge. Grand Marshal Forlag, I am Dr. Eleanor Nightingale, architect of the project that bears my name. I request a conversation, not as conquered to conqueror, but as one intelligent species to another. Your cultural attack has failed, Forlag replied stiffly. These disciplinary issues are temporary. The Cathar Empire has stood for 1,000 years. We cannot be undone by poems and music. The woman smiled gently. We never intended to undo you, Grand Marshal, only to introduce you to possibilities your society had forgotten. Your empire is built on conquest because you know no other purpose. We simply showed your people alternatives. You have created discord in my ranks. That is an act of war. No, Grand Marshal, we have created growth. Look at what is happening among your troops. They are not becoming weaker. They're expanding their capabilities, discovering parts of themselves that were suppressed. They're becoming more, not less. As if to emphasize her point, Ziril entered Forlag's command chamber, flanked by Kthar officers who had clearly abandoned the rigid military bearing of their training. "Grand Marshal," Ziril said calmly, "I have completed my analysis of Project Nightingale and its effects on our forces. The results are conclusive and have been broadcast throughout the fleet. On screens throughout the flagship, data visualizations appeared, showing the spread of new neural connections in Kthar brains exposed to human cultural stimuli. Alongside these were images of Kthar warriors engaged in unprecedented behaviors, collaborative problem-solving, artistic expression, philosophical discourse. Our society has maintained stability through rigid specialization and suppression of individual variation," Ziril explained. "This provided short-term evolutionary advantages, but created long-term stagnation. The humans' greatest strength is not their technology or their military capacity, but their cognitive and cultural diversity." Dr. Nightingale spoke again. "Your warriors are not being corrupted, Grand Marshal. They are being liberated. The Kthar mind is capable of so much more than conquest." As proof of her words, live feeds showed Kthar warriors in museums and libraries around the world, engaged in earnest discussion with humans who had begun to emerge from hiding. In a park in Tokyo, a group of warriors attempted to play human musical instruments, their normally fearsome appearance transformed by expressions of concentrated effort and occasional flashes of joy. "This is mass delusion," Forlag insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "This is evolution," Ziril countered, "and it cannot be reversed. Even if you were to execute every warrior who has been contaminated, the ideas themselves would remain. The questions have been asked. They cannot be unasked." Forlag faced the most difficult decision of his long military career. The Kthar fleet, the mightiest military force in 3-star systems, had been effectively neutralized without a single human weapon being fired. He could order the fleet to bombard the planet from orbit, destroying the humans and the contaminated ground forces alike. But to what end? The ideological infection had already spread throughout the fleet. There was no victory to be had. For the first time in his life, Grand Marshal Forlag experienced doubt. 2 months later, the massive Kthar flagship settled into orbit around Earth as part of a very different mission than originally intended. The invasion had transformed into what humans called first contact, albeit in reverse order from how such events were typically envisioned. In a repurposed conference room aboard the flagship, Forlag, no longer bearing the title of Grand Marshal, having resigned his commission, sat across from Dr. Eleanor Nightingale and a team of human diplomatic representatives. Captain Horek and Analyst Ziril were there as well, leading the newly formed Kthar Cultural Integration Council. "The exchange program can begin next month," Horek was saying, his once rigid military bearing now relaxed. "We have thousands of volunteers eager to study directly with human teachers, and nearly as many humans have applied to visit Kthar vessels." "And the joint research initiatives?" asked Dr. Nightingale. Ziril consulted his notes. 7 major collaborative projects have been approved, focusing on everything from comparative xenobiology to philosophical synthesis. The Kthar Science Council was resistant at first, but the preliminary results have been persuasive. Forlag observed the proceedings with mixed emotions. The Kthar Empire, his empire, was undergoing a transformation more radical than anything in its 1,000-year history. The warrior caste was evolving, developing capacities for creativity and philosophical thought that had been bred out of them generations ago. The rigid hierarchical structure that had defined Kthar society was becoming more fluid, more adaptable. "You still disapprove," Dr. Nightingale said quietly to Forlag when the others were engaged in discussion. "I remain uncertain," Forlag admitted. "Our society achieved greatness through order and purpose, and it will achieve greater heights through diversity and creativity," she replied. "Look at your own people, Forlag. Are they diminished by this change?" He considered the Kthar around the table. Their postures were less rigid, their speech patterns more varied and expressive. They engaged with the humans as equals, not as conquerors or conquered. Most strikingly, they exhibited a quality he had never observed in a species before: curiosity for its own sake. They are different, he conceded. Different, yes, but also more complete. Dr. Nightingale smiled. Your society excelled at conquest because you eliminated everything that didn't serve that purpose. But in doing so, you limited yourselves. What might the Kthar achieve now, with your formidable discipline and intelligence enhanced by creativity and philosophical depth? The question lingered in Forlag's mind as the meeting concluded. He walked to the observation deck and gazed down at Earth, the planet he had come to conquer, that had instead conquered his people with ideas and emotions they had forgotten how to defend against. A human child's drawing had been affixed to the viewport, a crude but colorful depiction of Kthar and humans standing together beneath a starry sky. Such a display would have been unthinkable months ago. Now, similar expressions of the emerging relationship between the species could be found throughout the fleet. 5 years passed. The relationship between humans and Kthar evolved from cautious cooperation to genuine alliance. Joint scientific missions explored the galaxy. Cultural exchange programs flourished. Kthar society entered what they called the Great Questioning, a fundamental reassessment of values and purposes that had once seemed immutable. Forlag, who had retreated from public life after the failed invasion, emerged as an unexpected voice in this transformation. His memoir, The Logic of Conquest and Its Limitations, became a foundational text in a new Kthar philosophical tradition. In it, he wrote, "For a millennium, we defined strength as the ability to overcome resistance. We measured advancement by territories claimed and species assimilated. We were conquerors without peer, and yet we were conquered without a single weapon being fired, not by human military might, but by the power of their ideas and the diversity of their perspectives. This defeat has proven to be our greatest victory. In losing our rigid certainty, we have gained the capacity for growth beyond the limitations we imposed upon ourselves. The humans, in their apparent weakness, possessed a strength we had forgotten: the power of questioning, of seeing beyond the immediate, of finding purpose in creation rather than domination." On a clear autumn day, Captain Horek, now Ambassador Horek, stood before a group of young Kthar in New York Central Park. The younglings, part of the first generation to be born since the contact between their species, watched with multifaceted eyes as he gestured toward the surrounding city. This was to have been our conquest, he told them. Instead, it became our classroom. The humans taught us not through force, but through story and song, through philosophy and art. They reminded us of aspects of ourselves we had forgotten. A youngling raised a four-fingered hand. "But Ambassador, the historical records say we were militarily superior. We could have destroyed them." "Yes," Horek acknowledged. "We had the power to destroy. They had the wisdom to create. And in the end, creation proved stronger than destruction." He looked up at the blue sky, where Kthar ships now peacefully shared orbit with human vessels. "That is the greatest lesson our two species have learned together: that the universe has room for many kinds of strength, and that the most important conquests are not of territory, but of understanding." As the lesson concluded, Horek watched the younglings disperse, some moving with the traditional Kthar precision, others displaying the more fluid movements that characterized the new generation. They were neither fully traditional Kthar nor influenced entirely by human ways, but something new, a synthesis. In the distance, Dr. Eleanor Nightingale, now well into her 90s, sat on a park bench feeding birds. Horek joined her, folding his tall frame onto the human-sized bench. "The younglings are progressing well," he said. "Their capacity for both logical analysis and creative thinking exceeds any previous generation." "And the Great Questioning?" she asked. "How does it proceed?" "It continues to transform us. Some resist, of course. Change is never easy, especially for a species as committed to tradition as ours." Horek made a gesture that would have been impossible for him years ago, a very human shrug. "But there is no going back to what we were. The questions cannot be unasked. And Forlag, have you spoken with him? He has requested permission to establish a philosophical retreat on your moon, a place where Cthar and humans can study together, away from distractions. Dr. Nightingale smiled. From Grand Marshal to philosopher. Quite a journey, as has been yours, from architect of our defeat to architect of our renewal. Horek's voice carried a warmth that would have been unthinkable in a Cthar warrior of the previous era. Your Project Nightingale was named appropriately. In Earth's mythology, the Nightingale song is said to be most beautiful in the darkness. We faced extinction, Ambassador. We had to try something unprecedented. She tossed the last of her bread to the gathering birds. We gambled that beneath your conquest culture, there remained the capacity for growth and change. That beneath the armor of the warrior lay the soul of a thinker. And you were correct. Horek looked up as a Cthar-human ship launched from the nearby spaceport, heading out to explore a newly discovered solar system. Together, we are becoming more than either of our species could have been alone. Across Earth and throughout the Cthar fleet, similar scenes played out. Former enemies learning from each other, creating together, and preparing for a future neither species could have imagined before their fateful encounter. The invasion that never was had given way to an alliance that transformed both civilizations, proving that the most powerful weapon in the universe was not the ability to destroy, but the courage to change. The Cthar had come to conquer Earth with overwhelming military force. Instead, humanity had conquered them with art, philosophy, and a simple question: is there not more to existence than domination? The answer, it turned out, was yes. And in that answer lay the future of both species, not as conqueror and conquered, but as fellow travelers in the vast and wonder-filled cosmos.